Maya was 16, home alone on a stormy Friday night. Her parents had gone to visit relatives, leaving her with the house entirely to herself. She loved the quiet, enjoying the freedom to scroll endlessly through social media, blasting music only she could hear, and wandering through the rooms in her pajamas without the nagging voice of her mother telling her to clean up. The rain lashed against the windows, the thunder occasionally shaking the glass, while the flickering shadows cast by the lightning created a cozy, almost magical ambiance. Or so she thought. By 10:30 p.m., curiosity drew her upstairs to the attic. The staircase creaked and groaned under her weight, a familiar symphony of the old house. But tonight, the noises seemed louder, more deliberate, as if each plank of wood were whispering warnings. She opened the attic door slowly. Dust motes danced in the flashlight beam, and stacks of old boxes and forgotten furniture loomed like silent sentinels. Then she heard it, a deliberate knocking, rhythmic and unnervingly precise, coming from the far corner. Her body froze mid-step. She had been in the attic dozens of times, yet nothing had ever made a sound like that. It wasn't a random creak or a branch tapping outside. This had intention. "Hello," she whispered, her voice trembling. Only the wind and the storm answered. The knocking resumed, louder this time, closer, echoing off the rafters. Maya's cat, normally fearless, hissed and darted behind an old rocking chair, arching its back. Maya's stomach twisted into knots. She could feel the presence behind the boxes, deliberate, observing her every move. Hands shaking, she dialed 911, whispering into the receiver. The dispatcher's calm voice instructed her to stay put, lock doors if possible, and wait for help. Maya pressed herself against the wall, trying not to breathe too loudly. But every thump of her heart felt deafening. The knocking stopped. Relief washed over her, but only briefly. From the silence emerged soft, slow footsteps, pacing across the attic floor. Each step sounded measured, patient. The weight of whoever, or whatever, was there pressed down on her chest. Fear rooted her to the spot. Minutes crawled by. She imagined a shadow slipping behind the boxes, felt a cold draft brushing past her arm. She could hear the subtle scrape of something dragging across the wooden floor. Her flashlight trembled as she tried to sweep the room, but the beam caught nothing, just empty boxes and abandoned furniture. Yet she knew something had been there. Finally, sirens pierced the night. Maya bolted downstairs, her cat racing after her, heart pounding, lungs burning. When the police arrived, they scoured the attic and the rest of the house, finding nothing. No footprints, no forced entry, nothing. The attic was empty, silent, ordinary once more. But Maya knew the sounds had been real. Someone, or something, had been there, patient and silent, waiting. From that night on, Maya refused to go near the attic alone. Every creak, every flicker of shadow reminded her of the knocking. Every storm, every gust of wind made her pause, imagining the presence watching her from above. Maya's story became a lesson etched in her mind. The scariest things aren't always visible. Sometimes the danger lies in the noises you can hear, the presence you can feel, and the knowledge that you aren't truly alone. 17-year-old Liam had always enjoyed being home alone. Saturday nights were his escape. The lights were dim, music played softly in the background, and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet. It was a small sanctuary from the chaos of school, friends, and family. Tonight, the air felt different, though he couldn't say why. At around 10:45 p.m., Liam decided to grab a drink from the kitchen. As he passed the living room, he noticed something strange. A shadow moved across the far wall, stretching and contorting unnaturally at the edge of the lamp's glow. He froze. For a moment, he tried to convince himself it was just a trick of the light, a fleeting reflection, or his imagination. But the shadow moved deliberately, almost like it was aware of him, and it didn't match any object or person in the room. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice shaking. Only silence responded. The tick of the clock on the wall and the low hum of the fridge filled the space, making the sudden quiet feel heavier, almost suffocating. His dog, usually lazy at night, growled low, a guttural sound that sent a chill down Liam's spine. The shadow lingered at the edge of the hallway, gliding slowly, stopping whenever he tried to focus on it. It didn't walk like a human. It moved with a strange, deliberate patience, as if it were calculating its next step. Liam's pulse quickened. He backed into his bedroom, locking the door and pressing himself against it. He could feel the shadow's presence lingering outside. Every creak of the floor, every faint brush of air against the walls seemed to signal that it was circling, studying him. The dog whimpered but stayed close, as though sensing the same unnatural awareness. He dialed 911, whispering frantically into the phone. The dispatcher's voice sounded distant, almost unreal in the oppressive atmosphere. "Stay where you are. Lock your doors. Wait for the police," they instructed. Liam obeyed, though the shadow seemed to press against his very senses, waiting. Patient. Minutes dragged. He dared to peek through the slightly ajar door. The hallway was empty, or so it seemed, but the shadow was never gone for long. Each time he turned his gaze, it appeared at a different angle, always just beyond the reach of the lamplight. Moving like smoke. Fluid, yet controlled. He could feel its awareness, a weight pressing on his chest, as though it knew each heartbeat, each anxious breath. Soft footsteps began echoing in the hallway, slow, measured, pacing back and forth. Sometimes the steps were faint, barely audible, other times heavier, deliberate, testing the floorboards as though to see if he noticed. Occasionally, there was a rustling sound, like fabric brushing furniture, sending shivers down his spine. Liam's throat tightened, panic clawing at his chest. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the corner of the room. The shadow seemed to flicker in response, stretching unnaturally before retreating again. Liam's dog barked furiously, hair standing on end. The room felt alive, charged with an almost tangible malevolence. Time blurred, minutes stretched like hours. He imagined the shadow creeping closer, felt it brushing along the edges of the hallway, hearing faint whispers that weren't there. Every instinct screamed that this was no trick of the mind. Something real, deliberate, and dangerous had entered his home. Finally, sirens shattered the tension. Police arrived, sweeping the house from room to room. They found no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no intruder, nothing. The shadow had vanished. Yet Liam knew it had been there, moving with awareness, patient, deliberate, and watching every single action he made. Even after that night, Liam never stayed home alone again. Cameras and motion sensors were installed, lights stayed on, doors remained locked. But the sensation never fully left him. Shadows in corners, flickers of movement, or even a sudden chill reminded him of the silent presence, lingering, patient, watching. Liam learned a terrifying truth. Sometimes the scariest intruders aren't seen. They are felt, moving in silence, testing boundaries, waiting for the perfect moment to remind you that being home alone doesn't always mean being safe. Hannah was 16, home alone for the evening. Her parents had gone to a concert, leaving her in their old, creaking house, a house that had been in the family for decades. She had spent the early night scrolling through her phone, earbuds in, music filling her bedroom. The house was silent, except for the occasional groan of the wooden floorboards and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Around 11 p.m., as she was lying on her bed, she heard it. Faint footsteps in the hallway outside her door. At first, she thought it might be her parents returning early, but the memory of their plans quickly reminded her that they were still hours away. The steps were slow, deliberate, echoing slightly off the walls, measured in a way that made her blood run cold. "Hello," she called, voice trembling. The silence that followed felt heavier than the footsteps themselves. Then, after a brief pause, the steps began again, closer this time, pacing deliberately back and forth. It was impossible for her to see anyone, yet the sound was real, each step resonating with a chilling intent. Her dog, usually calm at night, growled low in the bedroom doorway. Hair bristling, it stared down the hallway, eyes reflecting the dim light. Hannah's pulse quickened. All doors and windows were locked. Whoever, or whatever, was in the house had no visible way of entering, and yet the footsteps continued. Hannah pressed herself against the wall, phone in hand, dialing 911. The dispatcher's calm voice instructed her to stay put, keep the doors locked, and remain quiet. Minutes stretched like hours. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint rustle in the hall was deliberate. The intruder, if intruder it was, seemed patient, circling, testing boundaries, moving with the calculated awareness of a predator. Occasionally, a subtle thump accompanied the steps, like a hand brushing lightly against the wall, testing her reaction. Shadows shifted unnaturally in the corners of the room. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it a stranger? Something paranormal? The house had always felt alive, but tonight it felt malevolent. Time blurred. Each heartbeat thundered in her ears. The footsteps paused, then began again, slower, heavier, echoing down the hallway with deliberate menace. Hannah imagined the figure, just outside the door, watching her through the crack, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Finally, sirens shattered the tension. Police arrived, combing the house from top to bottom. They found nothing. No forced entry, no footprints, no intruder. Just the empty, quiet house. But Hannah knew the truth. The footsteps, the subtle thumps, the sense of being watched. It had all been real. Someone had been inside, moving silently, deliberately, patiently, leaving her terrified and shaken. Even after that night, Hannah never stayed home alone again. Every creak, every shadow, every faint noise reminded her of the presence. Cameras, locks, alarms. None could erase the memory of that night. She had learned a terrifying lesson. Sometimes the most frightening intruder isn't seen, it's heard. Felt always patient, always waiting. Hannah's story is a chilling reminder. The familiar can turn dangerous in the blink of an eye. And being home alone doesn't always mean being safe. The sound of deliberate footsteps can haunt you long after the night ends, leaving a sense of vulnerability that nothing can soothe. Oliver, 15, was home alone on a chilly Saturday evening. His parents had gone to a friend's birthday party, leaving him in the house with only his dog for company. The early night had been comfortable. TV on, snacks scattered on the counter, the soft hum of appliances filling the kitchen. Everything felt ordinary, safe, familiar. Around 10:30 p.m., hunger nudged him toward the pantry. The door, which he always left slightly ajar, was now completely locked. Oliver froze. He was certain he hadn't locked it earlier. Puzzled, he tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. Then he heard it, a faint, deliberate tapping from inside. Tap, tap, tap. His dog growled low, hackles raised, staring intently at the door. A shiver ran down Oliver's spine. "Hello?" he whispered, voice trembling, but no reply came. Only the tapping continued, rhythmic, unnervingly precise. He leaned closer, pressing his ear against the door. Beneath the tapping, he thought he heard something moving, dragging, scraping along the wooden floor of the pantry. His stomach twisted with fear. The small, confined space that had always seemed harmless now felt suffocating, like it held a predator waiting silently. Oliver grabbed his phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. He whispered to the dispatcher, explaining there was an intruder inside the pantry. The calm voice on the line instructed him to retreat to a safe room, lock the doors, and avoid the kitchen at all costs. He backed into his bedroom, dog at his side, heart hammering. Outside, the sounds continued, soft thuds, dragging noises, occasional scratches along the walls. The tapping grew faster, more insistent, as if whatever was inside was growing impatient. A loud bang suddenly rattled the pantry door. Oliver jumped, clutching the phone tightly, his breath shallow and rapid. The presence didn't move away. It lingered, patient and deliberate, testing him. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but the house felt like a trap. Minutes dragged endlessly. Lightning flashed outside the window, briefly illuminating the pantry through the crack beneath the door. For a split second, Oliver thought he saw a shadow, indistinct but undeniably present, stretching across the shelves before vanishing. Finally, sirens cut through the night. Police arrived and searched the house thoroughly, from attic to basement, every closet and corner. The pantry door remained locked, intact, empty. There were no footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing to suggest an intruder had been there. Yet, Oliver knew the truth. Someone, or something, had been in that small space, waiting. Even after that night, Oliver never stayed home alone again. He avoided the kitchen and pantry, every creak of the floor, every unexplained sound, reminding him of the tapping, the dragging, the presence that had been patient, deliberate, and terrifyingly real. Oliver's story serves as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the scariest intruders hide in the smallest, most familiar spaces. Being home alone may feel safe, but occasionally the safest room conceals the most horrifying secrets. Tyler, 16, was home alone on a Friday evening. His parents had gone out for a late dinner, leaving him in the dimly lit house surrounded by silence. The living room was cozy, the glow from the television flickering across the walls as he watched a movie. Outside, the backyard stretched into darkness, only partially illuminated by a single motion light near the fence, its weak glow barely piercing the night. Around 11 p.m., Tyler decided to step outside to grab a soda from the porch. The air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of freshly fallen leaves and wet grass. That's when he saw it. A tall, still figure at the far edge of the yard. Tyler froze, heart hammering. At first, he thought it might be a neighbor or a passerby, but the street was empty. The figure didn't move. It didn't blink. It didn't respond to his calls. His dog, usually calm outside, began growling, hackles raised, barking fiercely. The figure didn't flinch. Its presence was deliberate, patient, aware of him in a way that made Tyler's skin crawl. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't just a stranger passing by. It was watching. Tyler ran back inside, slamming the door shut and locking it. The motion light flickered once and illuminated the figure again. It hadn't moved, but Tyler could feel its gaze, piercing, patient, unrelenting. He crouched behind the couch, heart pounding, trying to steady his shaking hands. He grabbed his phone and called 911, whispering urgently into the receiver. The dispatcher's voice was calm but distant. "Stay inside, lock all doors and windows, and wait for the officers." Tyler obeyed, peeking occasionally through the blinds. The figure sometimes shifted slightly, pacing just outside the light, then freezing, as if aware he was watching. Every subtle movement made his stomach knot with dread. Time slowed to an unbearable crawl. The wind rustled through the trees, every branch casting moving shadows across the yard. The fence creaked faintly, a sound magnified in the still night. Tyler imagined the figure stepping closer, reaching for the door, pressing its presence against the glass, but each time he blinked, it remained just out of reach, just out of the light. Minutes felt like hours. Tyler's mind raced with impossible scenarios. What if it tried to enter? What if it had been waiting, silently observing the house for hours, days even? He felt trapped, the safe haven of home now twisted into a cage monitored by a patient predator. Finally, the sirens pierced the silence. Police arrived, sweeping the yard thoroughly. They found nothing. No footprints, no forced entry, no sign of anyone having been there. Yet Tyler knew it had been real. Its presence had been deliberate, calculated, terrifyingly aware of him. Even after that night, Tyler never stayed home alone again. Backyard shadows, flickering lights, and the smallest movements outside sent chills down his spine. Cameras, motion sensors, alarms, all offered some reassurance, but the knowledge of the silent watcher remained. He could never shake the feeling that someone or something was out there, waiting patiently, reminding him that appearances can be deceiving. Tyler's story serves as a stark warning. Being home alone can feel safe, but danger often lurks where you least expect it. The scariest intruders are the ones you don't see, the ones who watch and wait, leaving you to realize that true safety may never exist. If these stories sent shivers down your spine, remember, being home alone isn't always safe. Shadows, whispers, footsteps, and silent watchers can turn even the most familiar house into a nightmare. If you want more real-life horror that will keep you up at night, subscribe to Creepy McGee, and turn on the notification bell, because you never know what might be lurking in the dark, waiting for the perfect moment.